Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat some of the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry of writing and self-publishing. And today we are delighted to have a very special guest, Jennifer Vance, who is the marketing director of Books Forward, a journalism grad, a writer, just somebody who knows all about the juxtaposition between storytelling and marketing and stuff like that. We're delighted to have you, Jennifer. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great. And I'm so excited to talk with y'all because we, in our publicity firm, we've used Hidden Gems so much in the past and have listened to the podcast and stuff. So it's actually nice to get to speak with y'all.
Oh, well, that's very nice to hear. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
Doing well. Thanks, Roland. And thanks again, Jennifer. That's great to hear that you guys are using us, familiar with us. But why don't you tell us a bit about Books Forward, the company that you work for, so that authors will have an idea of, your background and maybe, that's something that they'll be interested in using in the future as well.
Of course, yes. So Books Forward is a literary marketing and publicity firm. We actually are celebrating our 25th anniversary next year. So we're really one of the original kind of literary firms to focus, on marketing for authors. And we do anything and everything from full out publicity campaigns, digital marketing, social media, website development. So anything and everything. And I've been here for a little over 5 years. I started out as publicist and then worked my way up to marketing director. And so I get to manage a wonderful team of digital marketing strategists. And everyone on the team is really great. Everyone can kind of do everything. We get to work with a variety of authors, from all realms of publishing, traditional, indie, small press, self-published, and truly every genre under the sun, and every age group as well. So it's been really great. We love what we do. We're very passionate about, our motto is elevating voices and breaking barriers. And we are truly passionate about giving a voice to authors whose stories we really, really believe in, and we think will resonate with readers.
That's awesome. Always good to hear that there are companies on the side of the author, the self-publisher, right? It's always
definitely
because, they have to do so many different things, and it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to look for expertise in the companies that do this for a living, right? Even if it's just to sort of get you going, so that you can figure out how to do it yourself. So, and that's kind of why we wanted you on here, right? We wanted to talk about some of the advertising and marketing efforts that are available to authors. I mean, a lot of authors know about the really specific and most popular ones, I guess, but there's also others that you probably can tell us about, and then there are ways to figuring out which ones are best for you. Not all ways of advertising and marketing will work for all authors, all genres, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go through that, and also we wanted to talk about SEO. I know that's sort of one of those topics that a lot of people sort of cringe at.
Oh yeah.
But it is a pretty important one, and it's a difficult one. It's one that I myself really don't understand that well, and any author that has a website is and that uses it, and some people just have a website, but I mean that actually use their website to try to generate traffic or make book sales. SEO is an important thing. You want to be able to, SEO being search engine optimization, you want your site to be found, otherwise why you're working on it, right? So
exactly.
So why don't we let's start off with that then. What can you tell us about SEO to starting us off from somebody who really doesn't, authors that really don't know anything about it? They have a website, but they, maybe they're already struggling with getting some traction to it. So what do we need to know about SEO?
Yeah, so basically, I try and put it in the simplest terms for authors, and that SEO is when you are on Google or your preferred search engine, Bing, etc. When your SEO is optimized, your name, your book title, those kinds of things are showing up in multiple places. Hopefully many, many pages down that Google search engine. And that works by a lot of different ways. It works by optimizing your author website if you have one. It also works by your name being in other places. So whether it's reviews on an app, an interview with an outlet, those kinds of things. So there's a variety of ways to enhance your SEO so people can find you. First and foremost, it's the easiest to start with an author website. And it's one of the few things I kind of try and nudge authors to have. If you're going to have any kind of presence online, I know social media is very scary and always changing. And so that can be a really difficult thing for authors to utilize because you basically have to learn, a whole lifestyle of social media. But with a website, it's pretty simple. There are so many platforms nowadays where you can host a website or hire someone to develop a website for you. But having everything in one place where readers can Google or, search and find you is really important, because as a reader myself, if I'm like looking up a book title or an author and nothing is coming up, that kind of sends off red flags in my brain of, okay, well, maybe this author's not putting in the time to promote themselves or their book. Is it because they don't know, or is it because the book's not quality? Stuff like that. So people being able to find you is really important. And starting with the website is, like I said, it's one of the kind of more easier things to do. And that we can kind of talk about like different website hosts as opposed to hiring a website developer. Because I know money is not infinite to some people, and we want to be able to do as much of this as we can, like on our own, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people use, the out of the box sort of WordPress stuff, or sometimes the providers have, ways to get you up quickly with a website. But I think that once that's done, people think, okay, well, now I have a website so people can find me, but that's not really where it ends. And I guess what we want to sort of really help people understand is that, what's the last mile between your website and the internet? You put it on the internet, but I mean, you're between your website and people finding your website, and how do we connect those two things?
Definitely. So there are a few like kind of key things you can do on your website, like when you've started it, like when you're updating it, making sure that you're linking internally and externally. So this means that on your About the Author page, maybe you have a review that you're linking to a coverage page on your website. So that's internal link utilization. And external links are exactly what they sound like. You're linking to other web pages. And so that helps the big, SEO algorithm. Really reading over the copy that you are writing, keeping it short and sweet, which doesn't mean that it's just 2 sentences and you're out of there, but breaking up your paragraphs so that they are, easy for people to digest. We know that everyone has limited attention spans nowadays more than ever. Making sure that your layout is legible, using keywords, utilizing keywords. And so, for authors, that can be your genre, your age range, your audience, all those different kind of things, and making sure that you're using those keywords on like every page of your website. And those can be things like if you look at your Amazon listing, like the kind of keywords that you're integrating there, integrating those into the book's back cover copy, pulling any reviews that are using those kinds of keywords, basically so that if someone, is typing in new fantasy book 2025, hopefully your website has something like that, right? If you're a fantasy author with a book coming out in 2025. So those are the few kind of things that you need to like kind of continuously update, and updating your website when you kind of get anything in. Like you can publish a book and be done with it, but hopefully reviews are always coming in. If you're having awards, you're listing those, and not just like the award seal, but like the actual text. Like the text on your website is very important. That is what search engines are pulling for those results pages. So, having your book cover is great, but you've got to have the book title and your name and those kinds of things consistently and in multiple places. Yeah.
That's so. How has the art of having a website evolved over the years? Because self-publishing especially has evolved so much. It used to be, when people like Craig and I got involved, you could publish a book on Amazon and get enough organic visibility to be a successful self-published author. These days, with so much advertising on the Amazon homepage and stuff like that, it seems like organic visibility is dead in the water. And then having your own website, yes, you have to actually build one, but also there are all sorts of different ways you could utilize that to help yourself find that visibility that you lost when advertising sort of became so prevalent.
Yeah, and the competition just nowadays is so much greater than it was decades ago. I think it's over 2 million books published a year, which is just a lot of competition, and it's a lot of noise to wade through. But like having a website, and that's when like publicity itself kind of comes into play. Being able to write a guest article for an outlet that directly links back to your website or, your social media, if that's what you have. That is what's also further increasing your SEO and your visibility. And so you just imagine you write 10 guest articles, have 10 interviews where your website's in your author bio, those kinds of things. Those are all directing back to, your website where all of your information is. And so that's why it's never just one thing when it comes to marketing, which, is unfortunate, but it's just kind of the way that things are. There's an endless amount of things that you can be doing. And so trying to utilize a little bit of everything is important. And so that's kind of when like publicity and getting the book out there through other means besides just your own website and your own social media is important. Because there's just so much competition that if you only do one thing, you're never going to be able to stand out from the people who are doing 9, 10, 11 things, right?
Yeah. And then, so the idea of, writing articles and going on podcasts and stuff that create those backlinks to you, right? So that's one of those things that's important. Like when you're saying including internal, external links on your website, that's one thing, but you also want other people to be linking back to your site as well, which also helps with your SEO. And so one of the ways that you do that is by writing guest articles where you can have have a link at the end that posts back to your website, or when you do podcasts and at the end they plug you and they put that on the pages for the podcast. All those things sort of end up creating that funnel back to you, which then help the SEO recognize you as a page of authority, which is kind of what they are looking for, right? They want to make sure that you didn't just put up a page and it's worthless. They want to make sure they sort of judge by how many people are linking back to the worth of your page, right?
Exactly. And that's kind of why, like, we do preach that there's no outlet that's really too small, because, even if someone isn't reading the guest article you did for a small blog, like those backlinks are really valuable to direct people back to your website and to improve your SEO. And so I know authors worry about that a lot. If you're spending time and it's not like the New York Times, is writing an article or something, those are still really valuable. Even if someone doesn't listen to the entire podcast, which we hope they do, but yeah, having those backlinks is still really beneficial.
And are there other ways to get backlinks besides, the more obvious ones like writing an article or appearing on a podcast? How else can people get other websites to link to them, authors specifically?
Yeah, so I think this is when like collaborating with other authors can be really beneficial. Lots of authors have blogs, and you do reviews or interview other authors. They also have email newsletter lists, which can be really great if you're collaborating with authors, directly through their website or their newsletter list, or even through social media. Those can be really personal ways to build up those backlinks as well. And of course, you can reach out to, I think we all get those kind of like spam emails like, hey, I write a thing, can you include my link on your blog? Like those kinds of things, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, because I do think building those personal kind of ties is more helpful, just, in terms of networking as well. But yeah, I would say reaching out to, comparable authors, even authors whose work you admire that you wouldn't think that they would respond to you. You never know truly in this business. And so, yeah, I think collaborating with authors is a really great tool that people don't necessarily utilize or they don't think of when they're starting a website or social media or things like that.
I think one of the things people sometimes overlook is they think it's all about how many people you reach. And really, it's about if you can reach one person enough that they decide to give a chance in your book, that's better than reaching 100 people who see your thing and don't do anything about it. It's like making that connection is how books get sold. And I can definitely see the value of having your own piece of real estate that you control everything about. Whereas instead of like just leasing space on Facebook with a Facebook page or Amazon with your author page or anything like that, you own your website.
Exactly. And that's why, our favorite authors, on social media and stuff are the ones who are personal because we are building that connection with them or, that parasocial relationship with them. But you can buy however many followers for social media or your email list or things like that, but it's not going to produce the same results, like you said, as building that connection with a reader.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it always surprises me that when people want to buy links, and that seems like more for your ego than for anything. But then
Yes.
I don't even understand it from that perspective because it's not even real people. But okay, so then from the perspective of moving on to sort of the marketing and the advertising, everybody knows about advertising in Facebook or advertising in Amazon, right? We talk about that a lot. Talking about your book in your newsletter or doing a lot of authors do sort of newsletter swaps now with other authors to sort of get their books into the newsletter of somebody else, and then they sort of cross-pollinate their readership. But what other ways are there for authors to do advertising and marketing? Maybe some things that they haven't thought of, and how do you determine which are the best ways for you as an author?
Yeah, so it's definitely going to come down to your personal goals as an author, and I'd say personal goals outside of selling X amount of books, because I know every author wants to sell books, and so that is Amazon, Facebook advertising. You're obviously trying to grow your exposure, and then your end result is to sell books. But yeah, I think every author needs to take a second to decide what their goals are outside of that. Because for some authors, it is building up reviews, on their debut so that, when they publish the second or third book in a series, they already have that established readership. For some authors, it might be doing speaking engagements with certain, niche organizations. And so establishing your goals is really important because that's going to determine what you should spend, those ad dollars on. And there's an infinite amount of, places that you can spend money. Some authors prioritize like paid media, like paid interviews or things like that. And if exposure really is, your goal and you just want to talk about the book to as many people as possible, then, something like that is an option. Paid media like interviews or having guest articles placed on websites and things like that. If your goal is to kind of build up your readership and get more reviews, places like Hidden Gems, other places that are directly reaching readers for advanced copies or for new releases, that can be a great place to put your money. Some authors want to build up their email newsletter list. There's tons of places where you can do promotions to build up your newsletter list. BookBub is obviously another big one. They have some promotions like that as well. And of course, thinking about the content of your book itself, if your book is about adoption per se, there's who knows how many websites out there that are targeting people looking specifically for content about adoptions. And maybe it's buying an ad in their newsletter, or maybe it's buying a website banner, or maybe it's if they have a magazine or something like that, purchasing a print ad. I wouldn't discount anything until you take a look and decide like what your goals are, because all of those things can be very valuable depending on your end game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a good idea for especially for nonfiction, self-help, all that stuff, like thinking about things in terms of if you've written a book about anxiety, then you find some websites that deal with that, where people with anxiety would be going, and you try to advertise on those, as opposed to just popping it up on Facebook, which you can do as well. But thinking outside the box of where you can advertise. A lot of websites have ads on their site, and they're getting that from some of them. Somewhere. Obviously there's the little applets that you get, and it serves you ads automatically. But a lot of websites are open to advertising for very specific, especially if it's relevant to their readership. So I think it's for genre fiction, that's maybe a little harder. I know there's Facebook groups that are specific to different genres and about readers, but it's very, very difficult to get anything, and they have all sorts of rules about who's allowed to post.
Yeah.
And be talking about your own book, because who would want to hear from an author about their own book? The rules don't always make sense, but not all the places that you'd want to advertise are as strict about that, especially if they have ads and you're willing to pay for those ads. So yeah, for sure. What were you gonna say there, Roland?
You were saying such clever things that I think I'd forgotten exactly what I was going to say. But I think it's so interesting to think of you mentioned so many different things, like BookBub is somewhere some authors have found a huge amount of success with that. Some authors, they stick to advertising. And at the end of the day, having your own website can be really powerful, because whatever you're doing in the advertising world, you can direct people there instead of to another platform. I've just started doing direct sales of my books, and it's quite challenging compared to just throwing money at Facebook and sending people to Amazon. But the advantages of it are massive, because you have control over this. You get your money back from direct sales so much quicker than you do from Amazon. So yeah, I think having your own website is like more of a fundamental point now than it ever has been in the past.
Yeah, that's such a great point too. And I feel like, like you say, doing direct sales from your website, you are building those connections to readers a bit more than if they were just purchasing the book, off Amazon or something like that. I would also say not to forget about people outside of your readers directly. And that includes booksellers, like independent bookstores, librarians, and book clubs, which are obviously made up of readers. But there are an endless amount of advertising with those as well. And we really love working with independent bookstores. We believe in them so much. And just meeting with your local booksellers can be a great tool for you, not just for, one book, but for your entire author career. So I wouldn't discount, advertising to specific booksellers as well, and librarians, because it's kind of the same thing. I love my local library. I'd say at least 75% of the books I read are coming from my library. And so having a library stock your book is a really important, tool as well.
And for authors that want to do that, do you suggest that they just approach the library with hard copies of the. I mean, a lot of authors, most these days are doing ebooks, but a lot of them aren't doing paperback, whether it's through, Amazon's direct publishing or through, there's a variety of different websites that do it. But typically, self-published authors, I think it would be fair to say, mostly sell ebooks, and they're not selling a lot of paperbacks. I know that when I was actively selling paperbacks, for me were more of a, I wouldn't say just vanity to have one on my bookshelf, but it was, there were other reasons too, like, you could get early reviews by publishing your paperback early before your ebook launch, and but I wasn't really focused on the sale. Like if I wanted to give away copies, signed copies or whatever as a giveaway, then that's another promotion. But I wasn't going to bookstores or to libraries to try to push that book, and I didn't have anybody working for me to do that either. And I think that that's probably still the case with most authors, most self-published authors. So if they wanted to do that, is that something where they would just take copies of the book and walk into a library and say, hey, do you want to stock this? Or how would they do that?
Yeah, if it's a local library, definitely. I would suggest if you are able to go in and meet with, usually there's like a collections or an acquisitions person, but at the very least, meeting with a librarian there and passing off your book. If you have any swag, even just bookmarks or something, those are great things to also leave. I mean, I'm sure you've been to a bookstore or a library where you've seen, various postcards or buttons or bookmarks on the desk when you're checking out. And libraries and bookstores are very open to things like that. They know people love free stuff and they want to be able to support authors, especially local authors. So that's why, yeah, if you're going to a local library or bookstore, I definitely say trying to personally meet with a bookseller there. That also goes if you're traveling. I'd always say to keep a copy or two of your book with you so that if you do happen to pop into a bookstore, you can give it to, the book buyer there, just meeting with them, saying, hey, I love this store. I'm so glad I got to drop in on vacation. Wanted to give you a copy of my book in case you consider buying it for the store. If you're trying to branch out from like local specific, then that's when you might want to consider like advertising that's specifically reaching, large lists of librarians or booksellers. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's multiple independent regional bookseller associations that you can do advertising through. The IBPA is one of our favorites. They have a big connection of librarians and do various advertising through that network as well, where you can directly target librarians that are interested in your work. So that's when kind of thinking about advertising when you're trying to branch out more than just local. But like I said, even just sending some bookmarks to a library the state over, you never know like what could come of that because people love free stuff.
The power of swag. There we go. That's a topic we've never even approached before. I do like the idea of approaching librarians because you're just as you're hoping a librarian will support you as an author, you're kind of supporting libraries as an author. And that's one of the things I think that self-publishing especially, there's always been this rift between self-publishing and libraries.
Yeah. And with so many libraries, right now in the country dealing with censorship and, government overreach and things like that, it is important to show that you are supporting your library and whether you're a patron or whether you're an author, they do need that support and they truly are invested in bringing stories to readers. That's why they're there. That's why they're doing that and building a community. A librarian or a bookseller hand selling your book and suggesting it to someone is so valuable. I feel it can be more valuable than an advertisement itself. Yeah, I'm going to trust a human being that's looking at me and suggesting a book more than I'm going to trust an ad on the side of a website. So yeah, definitely not discounting those relationships and those connections that you can build.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, social proof is probably the biggest thing you can use to sell your book. And there's no greater social proof than somebody one-to-one, somebody who you respect, who clearly knows about books, recommending what you've written.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you are sending your swag to a library, make sure there's a link to your website on it, right?
Yes, a link or a QR code. I'm loving QR
code. Yeah, yeah. I used to have one of those on a bookmark I had done as well. Yeah. If there are some authors though that don't see maybe the value of having their books in the library, right? Because they're really not earning any money off of each borrow, right? You get one, however many copies you give to the library, and they lend those out, and then those people read them. They're not really getting paid for it. So, and then, the idea maybe in their head is that if they are a person that goes to the library, they're just going to borrow the books. Do those people become a fan and then go search out their books in the bookstore to buy? Is that the feeling? Like, how would you, what do you normally say to an author that's wondering why they should put their book in the library?
I mean, just personally as a reader, when I read a book I enjoy from a library, I'm ordering that book like for my shelf at home. Which is not to say that every single book I read is going to be one that I buy, but I like to test, I like to test drive a book. I like to know that I'm going to enjoy it before I purchase it for my shelf. And now that's not indicative of every reader, obviously. And that's why, again, you can't just do one thing, right? Because you're right. Like a library will purchase X amount of copies for their branch. And that's all the sales that you're getting from that. So it is important to do other things. And maybe it's advertising elsewhere. Maybe it's, different kind of outreach or events. But building a readership and building fans, just like you would build through an email newsletter list or something like that, that is the value that having your book in a library can bring. And, hopefully you're popular enough that when your next book comes out, it's just kind of an automatic purchase for a library. And so it's a lot of manual labor to do this kind of stuff. And that's why people hire like publicists and people to run ads and people to do all that kind of stuff, because writers want to write at the end of the day. And I know that all of this that comes after writing is a lot. It's very stressful and it is a full-time job. And so if you can't commit to doing multiple things, it's going to feel like the one thing you're doing is futile. So then that's like prioritizing like what your goals are, making a list, making a calendar, things like that, hiring help like if you need it. Because it's just doing one thing, you're never going to find that success. I mean, you can run Amazon ads and spend thousands and thousands of dollars, but that's only going to be successful in one area.
Yeah, I think building up word of mouth, if you can get your name, your author name on the lips of people, it doesn't matter where they got it. If they got a free book from the library, they purchased it. If they tell friends about this latest book that they got, the friend that they tell isn't necessarily a person that goes to the library. They might say, I just read this book from the library. It doesn't mean their friend's going to be like, okay, let me run to the library and get it. They might be clicking on Amazon and do their purchase.
Exactly.
Right? Different people consume books in different ways and from different avenues. It's the same sort of thing that I tell authors that are overly concerned about piracy, right? Like, sure, piracy is a problem, but it's not a solvable problem, unfortunately. And as much as we want it to be, and we figure there's got to be a solution, the biggest media companies in the world have thrown millions, if not billions of dollars at this problem, and they have not solved it. It is not going away. But on the flip side of that, it doesn't really affect the day-to-day. Maybe it affects hugely named authors, right? But the self-published author, in my opinion, your book being on a piracy site is going to give you more publicity to that book than you're really going to lose in lost sales.
Yeah.
Most people that are on those sites were never going to buy your book in the first place. They're just people that
Right.
buy books. They weren't like, oh, if I didn't find it here, I'd go buy it on Amazon. No, they found it there, and that's where they get their books. But they might tell their friends who don't pirate books about your book.
Yeah.
And so it's not really a lost sale, but it could be a gained opportunity, right? So not that I'm saying, I support piracy or that people shouldn't worry or, but it's not as big of an issue And that for most authors that they need to really be losing sleep over it. It's just like a thing that is part of life, and maybe one day there'll be a solution for it, but right now there isn't, so it's not worth worrying about. And I really do actually think that it helps with sort of getting your name out there to just more people, with as all these other things do. So yeah, don't go putting your book on a pirate site yourself. but if you find out it's there, don't lose sleep over it. It's my.
I mean, in some ways, it's almost flattering that you've reached a stage in your career where people want to steal your stuff. They want your stuff enough not to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that word of mouth, that is so important. And it's kind of why I tell authors, if you're going to spend any money publishing a book, like spend it up front, like spend it in creating a quality product, you know, that's been edited multiple times, that has a cover, because word of mouth is really important. You know, if someone tells me about a book, and I go and see that it's, you know, it's riddled with errors, the cover is not great, you know, no amount of advertising or anything is going to fix that if you don't initially have a quality product.
That's very true. I used to sell radio advertising way back in the day, and I had one client who was like, it doesn't matter how much money you spend advertising something if people don't want to buy it. So the big crux is you have to have a product people want to buy.
Exactly.
Yeah, and first impressions are very important. I mean, if you might have written a really good book, but if people read it and they're put off by the errors or whatever it is, they're not going to come back to read it again, right? And finding all the money you spent acquiring that customer the first time is now lost, and they'll never come back, right? Like they might see your ad for the next book and they'll be like, no, I would have bought that, but I read the first book and it you know, it's filled with problems. So, you know, if you can make that first impression, I agree, you put that money into your professional looking cover, to editing, to all that stuff, to make sure that your book is as polished as it possibly can, and it can be. And then, you know, like now you find a customer, and they'll be a customer for life if they enjoyed your book, and you don't have to pay to acquire that same person again or have it as wasted dollars spent, right? So yeah, absolutely. So when somebody comes to Books Forward and they want some help with all of this stuff, where do you begin from that? Do you sort of get an idea of who they are, what they're writing, and then create a you know, a tailored path for them?
Yeah, definitely. So we ask authors to send us a certain amount of information, and that includes, you know, the first 4 to 5 chapters from their manuscript. We generally don't work with an author unless they've started building that manuscript and have something, as well as their goals, their genre. Are they a first-time author, or is this their 10th book? Their publisher, whether they're self-published or have a publisher, those kinds of things, because those all do matter when it comes into like tailoring a campaign for them. And of course their budget, because everyone's budget's different. And so trying to connect their goals with how much they have available to spend. And yeah, we have a wonderful team on the front end of things who hop on the phone, who are like on the phone, it feels like all the time, chatting with authors and learning about them and learning about their books and what they are hoping to gain from, you know, a campaign, because it is an investment. You know, as an author, as y'all know, like everything you're doing is an investment, and you might not necessarily see something from the first 6 months, year, 2 years, but continuously putting in the work is where you start to see that success. And so trying to set up authors as much as possible on the front end of things and the beginning of their journeys, so that they can start to see that success roll in down the line.
It's interesting. I'm surprised that, you know, a lot of authors are looking that far ahead if they haven't even finished their book. I mean, I would assume that you'd want to finish. I guess if you're an established author, that's one thing, but if you're a first-time author, do you really find that there are a lot of first-time authors that are contacting you without having finished their book at all?
I think we get a lot of feelers, just like any, you know, kind of company would. I think people are really trying to figure out, like, how much does this cost? Because every company's different. Some people have packages and things like that, or if some are like our company are more tailored to people. So I think, they really are trying to get a sense of how much is this going to cost me after I, write this book. And again, like I said, if they haven't had it edited or had their cover designed yet, if they're a self-published author, we're sending them recommendations on like how to do that and to put that money there first. Because like I said, if it's not a product that is up to market standard, there's only so much that we're going to be able to do for them. And so we really, we want to see people succeed, and it's really hard in this industry. There's just so much competition. And so, yeah, you have to have a realistic expectation of timing and budget and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if an author comes to you with a book that you just find, just has too many issues, do you generally say to them, here's what you should work on first before coming back and spending your money on trying to push it through advertising and marketing, because you're just going to end up wasting your money? And if you are doing that, what's the reaction? Is it are they taking that feedback well?
Well, thankfully, this is where I'm grateful that is not my main job. But yes, no, we are. Sometimes we might, read the first 5 chapters and realize this might need another edit. Like this maybe doesn't have a proofread, and it's maybe it's just confirming that it's going to get a proofread or something like that. Or sometimes it's realizing that there's some like sensitive content, and that it needs to go through a sensitivity reader or multiple beta readers before, it's something that we can commit to. A lot of people are generally really open to feedback, especially if they're a debut author. There's a lot of information, and so you don't know what you don't know. And so people are generally receptive. Like I said, we've been doing this for almost 25 years now. So we do have a handle of, what the industry, like where it's at and what it expects and what readers expect. And any suggestions we make, it's not, it's not negative to the author at all. It's just because we want them to have the best product available. And usually authors are pretty amenable to that feedback. And sometimes they'll go off and get another edit or, get a sensitivity reader or something like that and come back, and, then we can look and see like, all right, well, let's see what this campaign would look like.
I think that says a lot about you as an author and about whether you were going to be successful or not, because I think we all started off in a place where we needed to figure it all out. I mean, I wrote 11 full-length books before I had my first bestseller. And fortunately, most authors I've worked with haven't taken that long to reach the level of success I did. But you need to have that open mind. If you shut down people's suggestions when you're just starting out, then that doesn't really bode well for your career.
Oh, exactly. And you're not going to have a good time when reviews start coming in, because there's no book that is unanimously 5 stars across the board. The best books in the world are, have negative reviews. So you really do have to check your ego at the door and understand that there are a lot of people out there who are great writers, and you have to do what is best for you and position yourself in the best way. But you're going to have negative feedback, and there's going to be criticism, and hopefully accepting constructive criticism when it comes from people who, genuinely care and want to see you succeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We hear that a lot, actually, is, people that are worried about they get a bad review and they're upset about it. And, there's a lot of research actually that shows that a few bad reviews actually help sales, because it gives you more, it makes the rest of your reviews seem more authentic. If
Exactly.
These days people are so savvy, they know, something has all 5-star reviews, they're fake.
It's suspicious. It's very
you never have something that everyone loves. There's just too many people in the world. There's always haters out there, right? So Sure, if there's only a few reviews, that's possible. But like once you get a ton of reviews, like if they're all just glowing, nobody hates a thing about it, that is very suspicious. So it's always, I try to reassure authors and say exactly what you're saying. The best books in the world, look them up. They all have their 1 stars and their 2 stars.
Yep.
And all sorts of stuff, right? And who cares? Right? What I say is like you focus on the sort of the common themes. If you're getting one review that says some bad thing and no one else seems to mind it or have an issue with it, you can ignore it, right? But if you're finding that multiple people are commenting on the same thing, the same issue, then that's maybe something you should look at. But in general, like, yeah, you can't really worry about every single review that comes in.
My favorite review ever was a 1-star review. It was for one of my steamy romance novels. It was 1 star, this book is pure pornography. And underneath, someone had responded and said, thank you. I wasn't going to buy this book until I read the review. And then they did. So
see, what one person, what
exactly,
one person
helpful
is useful to another. Yeah, for sure.
Now, unfortunately, it looks like we're reaching the top of the hour. I'm so sorry. I cut you off, Jennifer.
No, you're good. I was not going to add anything of substance. It was just great.
Well, everything you have said has been of substance, and unfortunately, we're reaching the top of the hour, so we have to start wrapping things up. Craig, did you have any final questions before we ask Jennifer to tell us more about Books Forward and where we can find out more?
No, listen, I think that this is really, it's been useful because this is the kind of topic that every author needs to hear about. And although we talk about marketing and advertising a lot here, there's a reason for that, because it's pretty much one of the most important things. Once you've written a book, you've got to sell it. If you're a self-published author, that all falls on you. But like there are companies like Books Forward that can help with that if you need it, and to whatever level you need, right? So some authors will choose to do everything themselves and be very successful at it, and some will try and find that they need some help, and some don't even want to take that step. They just want to write books. So it's very useful to have that. So thanks for coming on and talking to us today.
Well, thank y'all so much for having me. I love talking about marketing. Like, it truly is one of my favorite things. And if anyone's interested, they can find us at booksforward.com. We are always accepting, submissions from authors. We've got a great team who loves talking about marketing and publicity just as much as I do. So,
now, where can people go and find Books Forward?
Our website is booksforward.com. You can find us on Facebook at Books Forward. We're also on Instagram, X, formerly Twitter, and TikTok at Books Forward PR. And I'd say go to our website. We've got some great resources as well, much like Hidden Gems, some blogs that are, if you are just looking for some information, maybe you're not even close to the marketing part of your journey. You can get a great sense of what we offer for authors there.
That is wonderful. Well, we will pop a link to Books Forward down below in the description. So why don't you scroll down there and check it out? While you're on the way, you'll pass that big, long, empty comment section. Why don't you pause just for a second and leave Jennifer a nice comment and tell her how much you have appreciated everything she has shared with us today. And also, while you're there, if you haven't already, there's the subscribe button, there's that like button, there's a little bell icon that you can click on, so you will get notified every single time there is a new episode of Fully Booked, and there will be a brand new episode of Fully Booked next week. But until then, thank you very much for joining us, Jennifer. We have really appreciated everything you've had to say.
Thank you all so much. This has been great.
And we'll be back next week. Cheerio.